I've done prior segments on how successful people tend to lose their minds when they get to a certain level of wealth. They're just not intellectually, morally, or philosophically equipped to deal with the fact that success does not make you a bad person. And this, ironically, way too often turns them into bad people. Since they're unwilling to give up their apparently ill-gotten gains, live a subsistence lifestyle, and send the excess to daddy government, which is what any level of moral integrity would require them to do, they spend their lives forcibly confiscating the wealth of other people to assuage their conscience. The psychological as well as economic problems caused by this cognitive dissonance are well documented, unfortunately. Many of those in the Jewish community, at least here in the US, have fallen into this trap. Case in point, the so-called Anti-Defamation League, or ADL. This organization was supposedly created to combat anti-Semitism. Much like the now ironically named Civil Liberties Union, it's hard to describe how far from its original mission the ADL has strayed. It was suggested recently by a certain prominent user of the social platform X that if this organization dropped the A from its title, it would have a much more honest description of what this organization was really about. In a prior segment, I mentioned a prior interview with Thomas Sowell. I'm going to replay it now with a slightly different slant.
Years ago, one official of one of the Jewish organizations in New York asked me, well, what can Jews themselves do in order to minimize the hostility they face? I gave him a one-word answer: fail.
What can Jews do to reduce the hostility they face? Unfortunately, the answer to this question, in way too many cases, is to turn into apologetic, virtue-signaling leftists who want to appear compassionate by stifling the rights of every oppressor on the planet, aka people keeping their oppressed victims from starving in the streets. That is unless, of course, these oppressed people happen to be anti-Semitic, in which case the ADL's expressed concern for the oppression goes right out the window. If you've seen any of my prior videos, you know that my argument is not going to be that the Jews need to learn to be more tolerant of the people who are trying to annihilate them. No, just the reverse. But American Jews need to open their eyes to the fact that success is not a crime. When one segment of a free society fails, it's very rarely someone else's fault. People fail, cultures fail, systems fail. Why? Because they're doing things that make them fail. The best thing that successful cultures can do to help failed cultures is to build things, create things, and maintain things that make the successful culture wealthy. Because when they do this, they have no other choice, at least here in the US, but to make less successful cultures more wealthy as well. This is proved by the numbers. The ADL is lazy, intellectually dishonest, and focused exclusively on cultivating an image as a champion of the downtrodden. They apparently have no idea that in doing this, they are actively sowing the seeds of their own destruction. If another group is always responsible for the failure of any group of people, it's inevitable that your own successful group will be labeled as responsible for the failures of those who are less successful. Add to that the well-intentioned but, well, let's say euphemistically, double-edged creation of a certain state in 1948, and you have a recipe. Now, not just a recipe, you have a guarantee of racial hatred that can only erupt in the type of horrific violence we all saw on October 7th. I've previously laid out a case for when a free market economy should consider intervening on behalf of another country. This calculus is complicated in this case by the ironic fact that Jews in Israel, as a rule, are more supportive of Western-style American values than Jews in the United States, and by the fact that, depending on who you listen to, there may very well be more Jews living in America than in Israel. Bottom line, though, American Jews, like the ADL, who for years have worked to erode the bedrock American values of economic freedom, individual freedom, and self-reliance, deserve our sympathy for the horrors of October 7th. They will deserve our support when they recognize their own role in laying the foundation for more and worse October 7th-like attacks in the future.